Hello, this is Daniel Mart, and today I'm going to be doing another top 5 um, list video. So yeah, now last year for Halloween and for October, I reviewed the Final Destination movies, numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. The fourth one is often called the Final Destination or Final Destination 4, however you want to call it. So yeah, now this time around, again in the spirit of Halloween and October, I am gonna be doing my top 5 favorite Final Destination movies. So yeah, I mean I know there's 5, so let's just put them in order, rank them, and yeah. So just to start off the list at number 5, we have Final Destination 4. So yeah, at number 5 you have Final Destination 4. Now I'm not gonna sit here right now and say that every single Final Destination movie is great, that they're all fantastic or whatever. The highest score I've given to any Final Destination film is an 8.5 out of 10. The lowest, which is for Final Destination 4, for Final Destination 4 or the Final Destination, however you want to call it, is a 6.5. And that's mostly because I feel like this is the movie that they kind of cheaped out on. Basically, they kind of, yeah, cheaped out, I guess is the best way to say put it. Like they're cheap with it in a sense. The goriest death, and it would have to be when Hunter, he's at the bottom of the pool, and his ass, like literally his butt, gets stuck to the drainage of the pool, and it literally sucks his stomach, his guts, right out of it, and then we see it coming up through the drain, and it kind of explodes through one of the drains, and everybody gets to see it. That's probably probably the goriest scene in this Final Destination movie for Final Destination 4. And yeah, like this movie is a slasher film. Like the series in it of itself is a slasher franchise. And really, with a slasher franchise, you want it to be gory. You want it to be gory to some extent. And when you only have one death that truly is gory, you kind of have a problem. Um, I mean, yes, I mean, and even after that, there are rehashes of death, or visions. For example, you have a character here who gets ran over by an ambulance, which is pretty similar to the first movie where you have a character who gets ran over by a bus. And even after that, you get three characters ran over by a bus towards the end. And even after that, it's not really shown in good quality. They kind of show it in between the credits and CGI skeletal form. Like they didn't really have the money to actually do that, so instead they decided to do a CGI, not mess, because it was more animated and it wasn't really like a huge CGI Michael Bay fest. But it was more like an animated death, and that really it looked okay, it looked good, but eh. So yeah, when the goriest death, when you only have one gory death out of like 10 characters, you more or less have a problem. And there's also the issue with the vision. Like like we kind of like we see foreshadow throughout all these films, like people foreshadowing, and we always see the vision at the beginning of the film. However, in this, they kind of use this ploy that the main character who saw the vision at the beginning, now sees visions of how every single character is gonna die, and that was also kind of weird. It looked okay. It was okay. It was decent, but whatever. And even the disaster was a rehash of the second film because it's a car crash all over again. So yeah, there's many rehashes. It's a tolerable film. It's still a watchable film, but it's not the best one in the series. It's still a pretty good film though. So yeah, now on to number 4, which would have to be. Now, in the fourth spot, I would have to give it to Final Destination 3. So yeah, now this one starts off with a roller coaster accident, which is actually really cool, really interesting to watch. However, the first problem with this film, like again, most of these films they have their problems. They have their problems. You know the type of film this is. It's a slasher film, okay? You know the type of films this is. But the action or the deaths are just cut weirdly, if you know what I mean. They're just cut weirdly. Now there is actually suspense, unlike the fourth one where there's like close to no suspense. The other films do have suspense, and now this one is a bit suspenseful. Like you have this one scene where the bodybuilder, like the jock type of character, he's in the gym, and right before he has his head caved in by some of the weights, like he goes boom, which is pretty funny. I know it's a bad representation, but whatever. Um, right before that, you have some pretty good suspense, and you have that going throughout most of the film, and you also have some pretty gory scenes. Like, for example, you have this character called Frankie Cheeks, who basically gets himself mostly decapitated, um, with one of the motor fans. And overall, it's a pretty good film. It's actually gory. It's actually suspenseful. The ending, however, again, it's kind of a cheap out. In a sense, it is a bit of a cheap out, similar to the fourth one. It's a bit now. It is a bit of cheap out. Now, the ending is better than the fourth one. However, again, the deaths they're at this train. They're in this train station in the subway, and all of a sudden the subway derails. The train derails, and all three characters are more or less killed almost instantaneously. And again, similar to the fourth one where they're killed instantaneously without us seeing, here you get to see the deaths. It's not animated. You get to see the deaths, but it happens so quickly you don't even have time to react to it. Now again, now you actually do have some gore here, and it is pretty cool. And again, it is a pretty fun movie. The foreshadowing, because you have the beginning of now the foreshadow is also pretty cool here, pretty good here, because this girl, the main character, she was taking pictures during the festival prior to the main disaster happening in the roller coaster. She was taking photos of everybody who was gonna die, and the photos each gave a hint of as to how they're gonna die, and that was overall pretty cool, pretty interesting. So I did like it for that, and again, it kind of furthers the rules of death. Unlike the fourth one, that really didn't further it. It just made it a bit more weird with the visions that the main character had. This one made again, it really doesn't make much, but it does bring a possible new insight, to the rules of death, either kill or be killed, type of situation. Like, yeah, it's kind of a sense, kill or be killed. Um, yeah, Ian, the one of the characters, Ian, he has kind of that mentality. Now we don't see it in this film; we see it in another film, which I'm gonna discuss later. But yeah, kind of cool to see that introduction to the series. Even at this point, even at the halfway point, up 3 out of 5, it's about the halfway point. So yeah, yeah, third film out of 5 so far. Yeah, it is a halfway point more or less. So yeah, really interesting to bring that new death rule into the mix. So yeah, kill or be killed, in a sense. So yeah, now onto the third spot, which would have to be Final Destination. So yeah, for number 3, Final Destination, the OG original one. Now, why did I do that intro for this film? Well, because during one of the scenes you hear a song. I forget what it's called, but it says Final Destination. I've always remembered that from that movie. For some reason, that's one thing I've always taken away from that movie. Aside from the plot, aside from all the grandness of this movie, which I'm about to talk about, that's one of the other things I've always taken away from that movie. That small light, Final Destination. I wanna listen to that song. Aside from that, yeah, this is the original movie. It's one of the definitive horror movies from the 2000s. Basically, when you think about it, in the 2000s, this is basically one of the revolutionary horror movies. Now, is it one of the best horror movies of all time? Hell, fucking no. Hell no. I can tell you that right now. But it is, for the 2000s. You have to admit, it is one of the best horror movies we've had in the 2000s. From 2000 to till 2009, it's one of the best. And even after that, in the past 16 years, from 2000 to 2015, 15 years, it's still one of the best horror movies we've had so far. It's one of the best horror movies of the new millennium. So, yeah, that's why I have to put it. It has to be number 3 right there in the midway point. And it introduces us to this new idea for a slasher film. Why not have the killer just be death itself? It's such an original idea, and the fact that nobody came up with the idea up until now, it's just surprising. Just have the killer be death itself. Have these group of people escape an event, and get them picked off one by one. Yeah, yeah, I mean, the original disaster, which is the airplane scene, it's not the best one. Like, well, it's not shot the best, because it is intricate, almost like with all these rapid shots kind of going in there, which I'm pretty sure is due to budgetary reasons. When you see the vision, everybody's kind of killed off almost instantaneously, and it's due to budgetary reasons. And yeah, and you don't know initially who's gonna die in what order, which is really interesting. Like, we kind of see that in the second film a bit as well, but that's due to another reason too. Which, yeah, and also another thing I like about this film is the fact that it just ties into every single other Final Destination film. Either A, they know more or less the idea of the Final Destination, because of this film, or because there's other movies that literally tie into this disaster, which I'm going to talk about later. Um, so yeah, I mean, it's really original. It's definitely one of the original best original ideas for a horror movie. Yeah, have death, have the death. Yeah, have the slasher be death itself. Genius. I mean, genius. Um, yeah. Now on to the second one, second best film in the series, which would have to be. So for the second best film in the Final Destination series, I'd have to go for Final Destination number two. So yeah, number two. So yeah, number two gets number two. So yeah. Now very fast. I actually didn't realize this up until now. I haven't said the ratings I've given to every single film up until now. So just to go over it very fast, I gave Final Destination number 4 a 6.5, Final Destination 3 a 7, and Final Destination, the original one, number 1, an 8. And the Final Destination 2, I gave it an 8.5. It's actually the highest rated movie in this film series. So yeah, now I'm gonna discuss why the other film, why number. I'm pretty sure it's pretty obvious. 5 films, 5 slots here. I'm gonna discuss why the other film, Final Destination 5, got number 1 later on, but now we're on number 2. So yeah, so how do you follow up a pretty original movie with a pretty good sequel? Yeah, and now it's fun. Now normally people say it's one of those rare cases where the sequel is better to the original. But when it comes to like horror film, like these type of films, like these kind of corny slash, well, not really slash, but more these corny, cheesy popcorn films, it's pretty easy for the original to be surpassed by a sequel. Normally, when you talk about that, it's usually with really good, well-made movies. Now, that's not to say that the Final Destination series isn't well-made, but it's more of the series is more of a popcorn action, shut your brain off, watch people get murdered by death type of movie. So yeah, and but still, this movie is better than the original. It's better than the original. I mean, you start off with this massive car crash, which is pretty awesome, and you get a new rule of death. In this case, being if there's, for example, more or less how do I explain this? If there's a pregnant lady, because it's most likely has to be a lady, if there's a pregnant person or pregnant lady, woman, in the disaster who is killed in the disaster. However, she somehow survives it because whatever. If a pregnant lady is in the disaster and is seen being killed, but survives the event and later has that baby, the list as a whole is erased because now a new person has been born that shouldn't even be alive at that point because originally he or she was in the womb. That's the best way I can describe it. Yeah, they kind of try to use that to their advantage. Come to find out that the pregnant lady in this movie never actually died in the car crash, so they're all still doomed. So yeah, and then they bring in this, and basically the way they describe it, new life can erase the list. So the way they kind of do that, they also kind of try to do this where she has a near death experience or she dies and then comes back to life. And the main character does that. And that's really interesting, and that works for like a few months from what it seems. Like there is trivia, I guess you could say there is trivia, I guess, where it says that yeah that lasted for a while, or either that or just death was too busy killing other people off. Eventually, they did die like 3 or 4 years after the events of this movie. So in movie continuity, the characters did, the last surviving ones. So yeah, overall it's still a pretty good film. It is better than the original. It is funner, and it's actually this movie is the movie that brought me into the Final Destination world or the lore, the Final Destination world, I guess, that got me interested into wanting to watch more of these types of films. So, and by types of films, I mean these series. So yeah, now on to number 1, which you could probably guess it already because I've already mentioned it. It would have to be Final Destination 5, or the Final Destination number 5, whatever you want to call it. That would, in my opinion, that is the best Final Destination movie we've had. Yeah, now I did give this one an 8 out of 10. So you guys are probably wondering, you gave number 2 an 8.5, and this one an 8 out of 10. Why? Because I enjoy this one more. Basically, just because you give something a higher grade doesn't mean you like it the best or the most. I give this one an 8 out of 10, even though I gave the previous one an 8.5. But I enjoyed this one more because it doesn't really tie to the series, and many people may find that as a disadvantage. However, I find it as an advantage, especially after the flop of the fourth film, after Final Destination 4, which did bad basically. It was probably as I said before, the worst one in the series. And this one reinvigorated the franchise as a whole. It wanted to keep the initial plot, the initial base of the series was having death being the killer, being the killer death itself. But yet they still went on with the rules of death. They still, you know, evolved the rules of death, if you could say, because now here's where the idea from Final Destination 3 kind of came in, whereas like kill or be killed. Here it's where you actually see it. You see one of the characters kill someone, and now they get a longer life. I mean, it turns out that that character who was killed didn't really have much longer to live, but we still see it. So yeah, I mean, I think that's the best rule to the rules of death. The kill or be killed situation. And yeah, I mean, they do tie it up to the original Final Destination movie with come to find out that the main two characters are on the plane. They're on the plane that the original characters from Final Destination 1 got off, and and these two characters from Final Destination 5 find out a little too late, and they die in the plane crash. And then the one guy who killed someone originally also died, and it also seems like life can be given to other people in a sense. And what I mean by that is, again, through the kill or be killed, you have this one detective who's killed by one of the characters, from one of our main characters. Now, one of our main characters kills that main character, so main character 1 is killed by main character 2, and now main character 2 has the remaining life of the detective that was initially killed in the chain. So, yeah, and also the bridge scene, the bridge disaster, probably the best disaster here. In the series, it's probably the best disaster in the series. Yeah, I mean, the rankings of these movies are also partially based off the disasters, in a sense. Like when you look at it, because Final Destination 4 had the weakest disaster, was kind of rehashed with the car crash in a racing stadium. Number 3 was a roller coaster. It felt a little bit rehashed again with the second film, but it was different. It was a roller coaster, and it was really intense. But it kind of lacked something. So yeah, the Final Destination 1 plane crash, the most original one yet, and pretty interesting. There's really no escape out of that one. Like if any of them had no escape, it'd be this one and the roller coaster. There's really no escape between those two. But the airplane gets a little bit bonus because you're like 500 million feet in the air. Final Destination 2, you get an escape in that one because it's a car crash. You can survive that. Not really, but you know what I mean. Final Destination 5, however, probably has the easiest one to survive, or if you think about, in a sense, it's probably the easiest one to survive. Like maybe not as easy as the initial car crash from Final Destination 2, but this one probably has the easiest one to survive. It's probably the second easiest to survive, because either A, you make it to the end of the bridge and you survive, or B, you land in the water, hope that nothing falls on you, and then you live. Because also, I mean, when you see Final Destination 4, initially you think you can't survive because you just have to get out the building, but when you think about it, there's many people who want to get out the building, and the building's collapsing at the same time with cars crashing everywhere. You're gonna die. It's pretty hard to escape that one. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, the disasters also make a huge essence of the movie. If the disaster's good, the movie's gonna be good. If the disaster's okay, the movie's gonna be at least okay. In case in point, Final Destination 4. So yeah, definitely one of the best. It's the best Final Destination movie we've had in the series. It's definitely it gives us more of an idea of who or what death is, and yeah, I mean, I would say it's probably one. Yeah, I'll probably say it. Yeah, I'll say it. It's probably one of the best horror movies we've had from 2010 to till right now. Because this movie came out in 2011. Now, are there better horror movies? Hell yeah. Now I haven't seen them, but I'm pretty sure they're better than this. We have Insidious. VHS, with Sinister. You know, It Follows many people like. I didn't care for it much, but people really like It Follows. There are better horror films now, but I do feel like Final Destination kind of goes under the radar and should at the very least be an honorable mention. And so yeah, now that's basically it for all 5 Final Destination movies. My thoughts on each one and the top 5 list, just to go over it very fast right now. Final Destination 4 is at number 5 we have Final Destination 4, and I gave that one a 6.5 out of 10. At number 4 we have Final Destination 3, which I gave a 7 out of 10. At number 3 we have Final Destination number 1, which I gave an 8 out of 10. At number 2, we have Final Destination number 2, which I gave an 8.5 out of 10. And at number 1, we have Final Destination number 5, which I gave an 8 out of 10 too. And 10 to, you know what I mean. So yeah, that's basically it for this list. So what do you think is your the best Final Destination movie? What's your list? Comment on that down below. Let me know. Like the video, share on Facebook, Twitter, MySpace, or whatever you prefer. Subscribe. I do movie reviews, TV show reviews, and comic book reviews. Comment all that down below. Let me know. Like the video, share on Facebook, Twitter, MySpace, or whatever you prefer. And that's basically it for now. This is Daniel Mart signing off.